Hi, my name is DeHaviland Ford, and I'm really excited about what the Lord is saying in this hour and as we enter into 2012. Many of you know that we recently had the Call Detroit at the Ford's Field, and people have asked me what was the highlight of the evening, what was the one thing that really gripped my heart. Well, there were so many different things that the Lord was doing, but one thing that I felt was key that God is going to do in this next season is the Lord was highlighting that He was raising up the Esthers. He was raising up a company of women that would begin to walk in the fullness of their destiny in the Lord. Now, let's talk about the story of Esther. Let's talk about how the same situations Esther was facing in her generation, many of us are facing in our generation. Here we see this little Jewish girl. Suddenly, she finds herself in the king's palace. She finds herself finding favor with the king. She finds herself on the stage of history. I say Esther was the spotlight in her. God put her on the spotlight. And suddenly, she went from just being this simple girl to ruling as a queen. But there was something else going on. So here's Esther. She finds all this favor with the king, with God, and she's in all of her glory. But at the same time, the Lord is raising up Esther. The enemy is using Haman to release a death decree, a genocide, to wipe out Esther's people, the Jewish people. So what happens? The Lord gives Esther not just an invitation to be a queen, but God gives Esther an invitation to be a voice for injustice, to be a voice to literally break the death decree of her day. And so here's what happens. Esther's uncle, we know the story, Mordecai, he says to Esther, Esther, don't think because you're in the king's palace that you won't escape this death decree. And finally, the weight of her role, she had to come to terms with, okay, am I going to take a stand for what is right, or am I just going to coast here? And so I believe that in our generation, God is asking us as women, as young women, the same thing. We're facing issues. We see through abortion, 50 million babies have been slaughtered in this nation. We see the human trafficking, women that have been sold into the sex industry. We see the crisis even with Islam. And just there's so many different levels. Women I call it the marginalized women of society. But God is asking a young generation, not just young and old, Deborahs and Esthers, to arise and let their voice be heard in the courts of heaven to shift things on this earth. I believe that God is going to have us shift laws and decrees. There's a young woman that we know. Her name's Laura Aldridge. She's doing a walk called Back to Life, where 39 minority women are going to walk from Dallas to Houston, and they're going to do a walk for life. Other young women that I know, Summer Johnson, that are taking stands, that are partnering with God, that are saying, we're not just going to sit back anymore. We're going to partner with the Spirit of the Lord to see change happening in our generation. But my question tonight is, what about you? God wants to write your name in history. God wants to use you. You might be 16 years old, and you may feel like, well, I don't have a big ministry. I don't have a big name. Nobody knows who I am. But I want to tell you something. God saw that little girl, Esther, just like He sees you. And I tell you, if you get a prayer life in an intimacy with God, that oil on your life will drip over and change your society. So I want to encourage you tonight to begin to ask the Lord to make me a voice, God, make me an Esther in this generation. If you've been impacted, leave your comments and statements. Or if God is using you to touch other young women or just however your sphere of influence, the Lord is using you, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much and have a great night.